Mandy Satcher, author of The Wholesome Child. Mandy, good morning to you. It can be quite a confusing time introducing your baby to solids, can't it? And I know since I was at that stage, there are so many more products on the market. What's your advice in getting started?
So first of all, I always say to parents, you've got a beautiful opportunity to expose them to a wide variety of flavors. Now, babies do have a natural predisposition to enjoy sweet foods. So it's our obligation to get them onto vegetables. That would be my #1 recommendation. So, yeah.
But starting with a very basic rice cereal, is that still the recommendation?
Thoughts about that have changed. We now really want to start babies on vegetables. So only 1 in 5 Australian children are eating the recommended amount of vegetables. So really establishing a wide variety of vegetables is the best thing we can do for those babies. We don't want to get them hooked onto refined carbohydrates. We want to get them onto something they've seen their mothers eat or prepared in the kitchen, and something that comes from nature.
So best veggies to get started on would be what?
Sweet potato, carrot, pumpkin, those sweet root vegetables, which are really easy for baby to take in, and they do have a natural sweetness, but they're not overly sweet.
And so your advice with that is obviously cook it up and puree it, which is pretty straightforward.
Yes.
And then what do you tend to do it in batches and freeze it? That was what I used to do.
Okay, so a lot of people today are really time poor. So doing big batches, if you're going to make sweet potato, doing a big batch of sweet potato and then freezing it. Instead of having to rely on convenience foods, you've almost got a backstop in your freezer, and it's very time effective, and it's also more cost effective too when you focus on those natural produce.
All right, and then slowly adding in a bit of fruit. I remember I used to put pear and apple and banana.
So first we start with vegetables.
Yep.
Once we've established babies on a full array, then we can move over to fruit. So the thing is, it's, you know, a lot of people eat 1 to 2 vegetables per day. We really want to get that much broader, and once we've done that and established them, then go on to things like apple, pear and banana, which are naturally sweet.
Let's that all makes a lot of sense. Let's now talk about convenience, because there's no doubt about it, there are times when you just want to be able to grab something out of the pantry, and there are so many pouches now on the market. What are your thoughts on all of that? Where should you start?
Okay, so my favorite is something like the Nurtured by Nature Nourishing Bubs. You can see the starter pack. It's got 10 different vegetables. So you're almost forced to introduce your baby to a wide variety. They're single flavors, so you're giving your baby an opportunity to get used to each flavor before just mixing them all together. And it's snap frozen, which means the nutrients are preserved. Things like the pouches and the jars, they are actually ultra heat treated, and it destroys some of the nutrients. So I always like going for something that's frozen. So these ones over here are really, really good. When you're looking at pouches, so moving on from those, the Nourishing Bubs range, for example, looking at pouches, you've got organic and then you've got non-organic. I do like organic. It can be more costly, but you know that there's no GMOs in it, there's no additives, and there's no pesticides used on the produce. But within each range, you've got sweet and then you've got savory. So my advice would always be to go for the savory options. And when I say savory, I mean go for the vegetables only. A lot of these pouches, they have fruit added to them, which actually makes them sweeter.
Yes.
And then within the pouch range, you also have custards. Now, some of these custards have 2.5 to 3.5 teaspoons of sugar, and that's for a baby aged 6.5 months upwards. So babies under the age of 1, they do not need any added sugar in their pouches or in their food.
What about, I mean, obviously these are very pureed, they're very smooth.
They're very smooth.
I remember reading something once suggesting that, in fact, you know, babies get to a certain age where they need a bit more texture.
Absolutely.
How do you get around that?
Okay, so the problem with pouches is they are very smooth, and we do want, from 6 months, babies should be heading over to finger foods and thicker purees and mashed foods. A lot of these are very thin, so they're not really helping with your baby's oral motor skills. The other thing is babies should suck milk, and they should chew their food. So when you give a baby a pouch, what they're doing is they're actually sucking it, and that's really not good for their oral motor skills. So if you are going to use a pouch, always put it onto a teaspoon, so you're still developing those oral motor skills.
Okay, that's interesting. And obviously you'd use a teaspoon to get it out of these jars.
The same thing with a jar. And the jars are the same as the pouches. They are also ultra heat treated. So you do have some foods over here which are frozen, but when you are buying a single serve frozen meal, always look to make sure that the sodium's low and there's no added sugar. The other thing is, we are all time poor parents, so there are times where these are appropriate if you're traveling or it's an emergency situation. But if your baby always sees you preparing or bringing out a single-serve packaged meal, and then the adults are sitting there eating something else, you're not really having those family meals. We want babies to see their moms in the kitchen, prepping food, getting the smell of food cooking. And, you know, as I said, I'm a time poor mom. I'm sure you are. You don't have to cook every single day. If you use your freezer, if you use leftover meals, and even with babies, if you say making a sweet potato puree, use some of those sweet potato and use it for, you know, sweet potato wedges on your plate, or do a shepherd's pie with sweet potato mash, so that even right from the beginning you're establishing those family meals and a sense of community. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just finally, quantity, I guess you take the cue from the baby. If they don't want to necessarily finish a whole pouch, Absolutely. You don't force it. So you never ever, the number one rule for all parents is never ever force feed a baby. We can decide what they should eat and when, but it's your baby's responsibility to decide how much, and they're very good at regulating their own appetite.
Listening to their body.
Absolutely.
Mandy, really helpful advice. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time this morning. And Mandy holds workshops on how to introduce solids. For more information on this, you can head to our website. All right, coming up next in the news, who will be our